Now, we have the last session, so I'll talk a little bit more about the remainder of the text, and then I'll have some closing things to say, kind of to explain how this can become a practice, what this means for us. And I don't have too many more things, so it may be that we finish a little early, in which case there'll be plenty of time for questions. Or if there's not quite a lot of questions, if we have extra time, if people want to mention any points, I can go over in more detail of anything that we've talked about. I'm happy to do that because some of the things I mentioned, I always kind of coming through them quickly because I didn't know how much time this was all going to take. But anyway, let's start with the next section. And actually, just before we do that, mention just a little brief review. So this morning, we had the different sections of the text that I divided it up into subjects. So yesterday we went through the two truths, and then we had the four extremes. So yesterday we talked about birth from self, and then this morning we talked about birth from other, which, as I mentioned, was more difficult because logically it would seem to make sense that things are born from something else. And as I said, conventionally that's true. It's very clear. Conventionally, cause and effect are different. They're different substantially. But in terms of inherent existence, that's something different. If can we pinpoint as something that we can, as I mentioned yesterday with the examples, that there, I said, America goes to war with Iraq, or America, causes something. So we could say that, America was the cause of the economic boom in the world at some point. That's true, but those are both very abstract things in some sense. Can we actually pinpoint what is America and what is this economic boom as two different things? The more we try to nail it down exactly what it is, we see that among all the different parts that constitute something, which we label something, none of those parts actually is the thing we're talking about. So in that sense, for things to be born from something else, we have to be able to locate both of those things as two separate things, and that becomes very difficult. And also, as I mentioned, in terms of time, we could say I'm the product of my childhood. But then the question is, where is your childhood? Can you find it anywhere in the world? And we'd say, well, it's not here anymore. But then the question is that, how did it ever exactly exist? Is it something that we can say this exists in a very solid way, fixed way, if we can ever locate it? So then we talked about the four illusions, the different ways that we have different wrong views about things. So somebody asked about meditation on selflessness, and I thought it might be good just to reiterate that at the beginning, these other meditations, so on the holding what is clean, what is unclean to be clean, holding what is impermanent to be permanent, holding what is suffering to be happiness. It's really good to focus on these as a personal practice. We can think about the meaning of emptiness, but until we get some understanding of what it means, then to try to meditate on it can actually be a little counterproductive because we don't really know what we're talking about or we're thinking about. Once we start getting some experience of what's being said here, then we can start to reflect on it and recognize, just very simply, the way that we project excessive qualities onto objects. When we get angry, it's definitely the case that we're holding the object to exist in a way that it doesn't. So we can deconstruct that and see that, either this person didn't do what I think they did, so it's purely, in my mind, it's purely a wrong accusation, and I'm just projecting all these wrong qualities onto the person, or they did something, but I'm exaggerating how bad it was, or I'm exaggerating their existence. Like I mentioned yesterday with Donald Trump, a lot of people might get very angry at him for his actions, but then we have to look more deeply. We see, who is this person that's so solid? This is a person who had a particular childhood, a particular upbringing, And if we were to understand all the factors going into their behavior, it would actually make sense. We would see, you know, if I had had that same experience in life and I had had the same background, it seems like maybe I would have behaved the same way. So it's not this solid thing that this inherently existent person. You know, Chandrakirti gives the example, not Chandrakirti, Shantideva gives the example, you know, when somebody hits me with a stick and it hurts, you know, but there's several different factors at play here. There's my body, for one thing. If I didn't have a physical body, then it wouldn't hurt. And then there's the stick, and then there's the person, and then there's the afflictions in that person's mind. And of all those four things, I choose to get angry at the person. But why don't I get angry at myself for taking existence in a human body that is subject to pain? And why don't I get angry at the stick? And if I think, well, it's not the stick's fault, it's the person who swung the stick, so I should get angry at him. But it's not his fault because it's the fault of the afflictions that are controlling his mind. He's not in control of himself. So why don't I get angry at his afflictions? It's only due to habituation, the way that we think about it, that we get angry at that particular link in the chain, you might say. And then in terms of meditating on ourself, it's trying to recognize that we create a particular story of our life. I talked about this also yesterday morning. And that story, that narrative that we have, although it might be helpful for helping us to function, it can also take on too much of a solidity for us. And then we experience happiness and suffering based on that. And this kind of thing takes a lot of concentration. That's what I will talk about in the concluding remarks. Because without concentration, meditation and emptiness is probably not going to have a lot of effect. It really has to be grounded in more concentration. So I talked about the four illusions, and then I talked about the stages of afflictions, the way that afflictions arise. So I think this is very practical, to see how this holding of inherent existence is not just something philosophical, but it has to do with how we experience everyday life. And then I talked about cessation. What is nirvana? This is a very difficult point. But again, it's important to think about this as Buddhists, because we have to have some sense, if we just have faith that if I practice as a good Buddhist, I'll get enlightened. But we don't have really a clear picture of what that would mean, or a clear, a personal conviction that this is really something real. We have to reflect on what is meant by this. What does it mean to, achieve nirvana? What would that entail, and how does it exist? So now the next section in Nagarjuna's text, karma. So I talked about karma in the general introduction as well, but he also mentions it in the text. Again, this is somebody who's saying that, well, how can you say things don't truly exist? The Buddha said karma exists, and karma has effects, and how can it have effects if it doesn't truly exist? So we have the opponent saying, the Lama Blessed One has taught that karma stays, its nature too, of its results, non-wastage too, and individualities. So the person is giving 5 different attributes of karma. First of all, karma stays, meaning that if I perform an action, then the imprint of that action stays until I experience the result. So it's not just made up. I don't have to always be thinking about it. It's functioning in and of itself. And secondly, karma has nature. There's virtuous karma, there's non-virtuous karma, and karma has different kinds. If you study more in depth in karma, this is a very complex topic. We have what we call impelling karma or throwing karma, and then actualizing karma, and then completing karma. And then we also have different kinds of divisions, like karma that's accumulated and performed, and a karma that's not accumulated but is performed, or is accumulated but not performed. There's many different ways of dividing karma and understanding it. The Buddha taught a whole lot of permutations because this is a very complex topic. And so the person is saying, well, all of these different kinds of karma, they all have their different functions. So how can that be if it's all non-inherently existent? And then of its results as well. There's a result of karma. The Buddha said, strong production. It's a very strong result. Everything we're experiencing now is the result of a past karma. And then non-wastage. That karma, you might know the 4 attributes of karma. That karma increases, meaning that a small action can bring a great result. And karma is definite, that if an action is done, it will definitely have a result if the action is not purified. And then that any action done, if you do an action, you have to meet a particular result that's concordant with that. It's not going to bring something that is discordant. So like if you do something negative, you won't experience happiness. And on the other side of that is that we can't meet with karma. We can't meet with results for something we didn't create the result for, the cause for. So any action, any experience we have in life, there must have been a cause, even if we don't remember creating it, or even if we're not aware of having created it. And then individualities, that a particular person experiences their own karma. I experience the result of my karma, and somebody else experiences the result of their karma. I can't experience the result of somebody else's karma. There is what we call collective karma. So we have both common and uncommon karma. So I'm experiencing my own uncommon karma, which is my own body, for one thing, and then also my own experiences of pleasure and pain, and my own perspective on the world. But then we have collective karma as well, so external things that we both experience. So there's an earthquake or a tidal wave or a storm, whatever external things there are, these arise through collective karma of different beings that have the karma to experience them. So how can all of that function if it's all just projected by mind, or it's all just imputed by mind? So Nagarjuna responds, all karma is without nature, he said. What isn't born won't go to waste. From that again comes holding self, that holding too from thought is born. So he said, the Buddha said. So not only did Buddha say that karma stays, it has its nature and its results and so forth, he also said it's without nature. That meaning, it's when we say it has nature in it in the first stanza and the second stanza without nature, they're talking about 2 different things actually. Its nature means its conventional nature. Like the conventional nature of fire is heat, the conventional nature of water is moistening, we'd say. The ultimate nature is its absence of inherent existence. So without nature meaning without inherent existence, and the Buddha taught this as well. So what isn't born won't go to waste, saying that this could be understood 2 different ways. So we could think that he's saying, what isn't inherently born won't inherently go to waste. But that isn't really proving how it has this non-wastage, how it is that karma doesn't, if you create it, it won't just disappear. But the point here, actually, what isn't inherently born won't conventionally go to waste. Meaning that if it was inherently born, if it was inherently existent, then it couldn't create any result. It's again the opposite of what the person thinks. If it was inherently existent, it would be fixed and independent and couldn't have any efficacy in the world. But because it's not inherently born, it's in a process of constant change. And therefore it won't go to waste because it will have a result. It will have some efficacy in the world in interacting with other things and creating a result. And then from that again comes holding self, meaning that from that result, then again, there is the sense of I, which is again the root of samsara, this ignorance. And then from that, that holding is also from thought. And we talked about this morning, the thought meaning superstitious thoughts, the 4 perversions, the 4 illusions. That holding of self comes from thinking that what is impermanent is permanent and so forth. So then he goes on, if karma had a nature, then the body thrown would be permanent. And karma wouldn't ripen too with suffering. It would be self. So here, he's saying that if you actually, quite the opposite, if you said karma had inherent existence, then the result of it would also have inherent existence and be solid and fixed, the body that we have. Thrown, meaning that we talk about karma throwing this body. One of the great scholars, Asanga, he talks about this. It's like you create karma and you shoot an arrow in the air. So that's like throwing it in the air. And then it comes down and it hits you in the head. So you're actually creating your own suffering in that way. So when we create any action, it's like throwing something in the air. And then when we die, that ripens by falling down on us. This creates the condition for our next life. And it's ourselves who throw ourselves into the next body. It's not somebody else that impels our birth. But in any case, so this body that we've taken on would be permanent. It wouldn't be in a process of constant change. The reason it's in a process of constant change is because the karma that's fueling it is constantly changing. It itself is a dynamic thing. So if the karma was not dynamic, then the body would also be fixed. And the karma wouldn't ripen as suffering because it wouldn't change. It wouldn't be able to transform into something else. It would be self, meaning that it would have a self-inherent nature. It wouldn't be able to, it would also be able to be located when we search for it. But like anything else that we can talk about, it doesn't have this kind of inherent nature. And then this karma is not condition born, not slight as birth without them too. Compounded things illusion-like, a town of ghosts or a mirage. So again, it's just saying that karma does not come from conditions in the sense that it does not inherently arise from causes and conditions. Yet at the same time, there's no karma that doesn't come from the conditions. It's neither born nor non-born in the sense that it's not inherently born and not inherently non-born. This is the middle way of Nagarjuna's philosophy. And compounded things, he gives examples, illusion-like, a town of ghosts or a mirage. So similarly, in root wisdom, there's a debate related to this. This is a major qualm, thing that people bring up. And all the Buddhist schools try to answer this question. It says if karma stayed till ripening, then karma will be permanent. If it stopped, then from what has stopped, how can a result be born? So the point is that if you say that you create a result in one life, then you experience, so you create a karma in the one life, you experience the result in the next life. Either the karma stays until you experience the result, or it stops when you create it. But if it stays until the result is ripened, then the karma is permanent. And that contradicts the Buddha saying that all compounded phenomena are impermanent. And if it stops, then from what has stopped, if it's no longer there, how can there be a result? But this, again, all the different schools have different opinions on this. And as I mentioned yesterday, some of them say, well, there's this other thing called non-wastage that gets deposited on the mind. Or there's the mind-only school saying that there's the mind basis of all that is storing these seeds. But then there's this philosophy which says, because this karma has no birth, therefore has no nature. So because this isn't born, therefore it also doesn't go to waste. So this is the same as what he was saying in 70 stanzas, that because it's not inherently born, then conventionally it doesn't go to waste. Conventionally, it is in a dynamic process of change, and it can bring this result. Through the process I described yesterday, in Chandrakirti talks about this integratedness, that what happened in the past, we think of it as having ceased already. And conventionally that's so. But it only is something that has ceased in perspective of a particular person in relation to a particular experiencer. So that doesn't mean that it doesn't have some kind of efficacy. We experience time as passing in a particular way, but it would seem that it's saying that there can be some connection between the past and the future, beyond our experience of it as passing in this linear way. So I won't talk much more about karma because that will be an entirely different subject. We could talk about all these different permutations of karma for an entire course. But I just want to go through a little bit more of the text. So this is the last section. I'll go through the path, the path that leads to cessation. So here we have verses 64 and 65. And if you probably don't remember, but when I read the first verse yesterday, I said that the first verse and then verse 64 are the two most important. This verse 64 is often quoted in other texts because it's showing what is the cause of samsara. And then the next verse is saying, how do we reverse that? So the thought, all things born from a cause and circumstance are genuine. The teacher called this ignorance. The 12 links all arise from that. So it's saying that when we have the 12 links of dependent origination, the root of them, the first link, is ignorance. And what is ignorance? It's the belief that things that come from causes and conditions are inherently existent. So that conception that we have is what causes all of our other sufferings. We have to identify that conception. It's not a philosophical view. Some people might philosophically hold that view. However, the main point is that this is an unconscious level of grasping, or maybe pre-conscious, we could say. It's something that before we even start interacting and start having thoughts about something, we've already identified it in a habitual way as existing in a solid sense, as existing in the way that it appears to us, which means that it's findable. All those 6 examples that I gave yesterday, in any of those cases, we talk about something and then it seems as though it has some kind of existence before we impute that existence. So we talk about a boat and we say, well, what is a boat? And somebody could argue, well, when you break this much of the boat, it's no longer a boat. And somebody else could say, that, well, once you've replaced this many different planks, it's a different boat. All these different things. And we could argue about it. But the whole point is that that's assuming that our conception of a boat actually corresponds to something that exists beyond our conception of it. We think that there's something out there that we then call a boat, as opposed to we imagine a thing called a boat and then identify it with certain aspects of our sense perception. It's not, and again, this is very subtle because it's not saying that it's wrong. It's right to call it a boat and wrong to call it a house. However, when we say it, when we try to pinpoint exactly what it is, we can't locate it. And we have this conception about everything that exists. We create an entire picture of our experience and our universe, and have an entire story of our life that's constantly unfolding. And believing this to exist in the way that it does, this is ignorance, and this is the root of the 12 links. So then to rightly realize things as void, that's accurate, so confusion stops. That puts an end to ignorance. 12 links all will cease from that. So again, the opposite of that is when we recognize what we're doing, we recognize the way that our mind is creating our experience of reality, then that's the right view. And so we stop being confused about how things exist. And from that, we'll stop the second link, creating karma. And that will stop putting imprints on our mind, and that will stop us being born and having more experiences in samsara. So just also we say the 12 links all arise from that in the first verse. There's a question that comes up here. We said the first link, so shouldn't it say the 11 other links all arise from that, as opposed to the 12 links all arise from the first link? But Tsongkhapa says that this is correct because ignorance begets more ignorance. So it only fuels itself continuously. But when we can stop ignorance, then gradually, it will stop creating more ignorance in the future. So likewise, a very similar concept in the text 400 Stanzas by Nagarjuna's student Aryadeva. Again, His Holiness the Dalai Lama often quotes this verse, or these two verses. As body on the body sense, all depend on ignorance. So all afflictions will as well, by quelling ignorance, be quelled. Dependent relative arising, when seen, this ignorance won't arise. So every effort has been made to clarify this theme alone. So we say the body on the body sense. The understanding is that in terms of the sense powers of the body, unlike the other sense powers, the body sense power pervades the body. So like, we have the eye sense power, and you can see with your eye, but you can't hear with your eye. And you can hear with your ear, but you can't see with your ear. But you can feel with your eye, and you can feel with your ear. If somebody pokes you in the eye, it hurts. If you cut your ear, it hurts. If you cut your nose or you cut your tongue, it hurts. So the body sense power pervades all of the other sense powers. So likewise, all afflictions depend on ignorance. So this is a unique view, actually, of the Prasangika, the Chandrakirti's consequentialist school, that ignorance, every moment of any affliction is concomitant with ignorance, and ignorance being the conception of inherent existence. So I mentioned earlier the stages of afflictions. First, we have fabrication, which is the conception of inherent existence. Then we have the four perversions, which is the superstitious thoughts. Then we have the afflictions of attachment and anger. And then we have karmic actions. So although the first stage is this in grasping at inherent existence, it actually is subtly pervading all of them. So when we think impermanent things are permanent, we actually hold them as inherently existently permanent. And when we hold that things that are suffering are actually happiness, we hold them as inherently existent happiness. And then when we get attached to an object, we hold it as inherently existent attractive. And when we get angry at something, we hold it as inherently existent repulsive. And then when we create an action, we practice generosity, we think I, an inherently existent person, am giving an inherently existent object or money to an inherently existent poor person. And when we do a negative action, an inherently existent I is harming an inherently existent other person. So every step of the way is pervaded by ignorance at a subtle level. So this ignorance is the root of all of it. We can recognize a more coarse objective negation, we would say. So like, as I said, when we get angry at somebody, we can recognize, yes, this person is not as bad as I think they are. But still, we haven't really gotten to the root of the misconception going on here, which is that we conceive of this person as existing in a solid, independent way that is out of accord with how they actually exist. So all afflictions will as well, by quelling ignorance, be quelled. So if we can put an end to this ignorance, then all of the afflictions will cease. We will not be angry, and we will not have attachment. So then we have dependent relative arising. When seen, then ignorance won't arise. So again, this makes it very clear that in this system, dependent arising and emptiness mean the same thing. Now, when we say mean the same thing, it's not like synonyms exactly, because they're talking about two different concepts. However, when we understand them properly, we see that they are two ways of describing the same phenomena. So because something is empty, then it has to be dependently arisen. And because something is dependently arisen, it has to be empty. It's said that when we first learn about these, it seems like they're two different things. But somebody who is really habituated to this pattern of thinking, then they imply each other. We think it's empty, it's dependent. Therefore, it doesn't exist fixed and independently. It's empty. And it's empty. Therefore, it's dependent on other things for its existence. It doesn't have this fixed self. So one of the teachers says that this is like, once we learn that the meaning, the word I, the physical I, refers to the visual organ, then when somebody says I, you immediately understand that to mean the visual organ. And when somebody talks about the visual organ, you immediately, it's my eye. So in the same way, it becomes just natural. When somebody says emptiness, you think of dependent arising. And when somebody says dependent arising, you think emptiness. So when seen, when understood, then ignorance won't arise. So every effort has been made to clarify this theme alone, meaning that in these texts, we've made every effort to describe this and to help us to understand this. Because if we really want to be free of afflictions, then we have to understand dependent arising. And therefore, we have to understand emptiness. So then we have the last part of 70 stanzas, the closing 6 stanzas. All things are empty of nature, so the unequal tatthaka, dependent and relational, arising for all things thus taught. The highest truth is that alone, the world's perspective in its terms, all variegated things by these, the blessed perfect Buddha taught. He didn't violate the teachings of the world, yet in reality he never taught. Not comprehending Tathagata's speech, some toward this stainless discourse feel afraid. So first of all, we have exactly what we just had in the last part, that all things are empty, so therefore the Buddha taught dependent arising, because this means the same thing. And the highest truth is that alone. That's this dependent arising is the highest truth, and this emptiness is the highest truth. You don't have to search for it somewhere else in the Buddha's teachings. And yet the world's perspective in its terms, all variegated things, means all conventional truth. As you remember, I said, conventional truth is variegated. Things all appear to be existing differently in a fragmented way. There's all these different things in the world that appear to be unrelated to each other. And on the basis of that, on the world's perspective in its terms, the Blessed One taught, the Buddha taught. Because we couldn't understand, if the Buddha just appeared and just immediately started teaching emptiness, you might have heard that when the Buddha first became enlightened, he was said to have recited this verse. It says, Sabji Chodrel Uzel Dumache, which His Holiness says, the Sabji, the first word, it means profound and peaceful. So I've just realized something that was profound and peaceful. Profound meaning it's hard to realize, and peaceful. It's the freedom from suffering. And Uzel means clear light, and in this context, it means empty. So His Holiness says, this represents the teachings on emptiness. The first part represents the teachings on the Four Noble Truths. And then he says, Turdrel. Sabji Turdrel Uzel Dumache. I made a mistake. So the second part, Turdrel, means free of fabrication. This is talking about emptiness, sorry. So he talks about first profound, peaceful, means the Four Noble Truths. And then he talks about Turdrel, meaning free from fabrication. It's empty. And then he says Ozel. In this case, Ozel, because the sometimes can mean emptiness, the clear light, but actually here he's talking about the clear light mind, the mind realizing emptiness. And this is said to be the third turning of the wheel. So he just summarized the teaching that he was going to teach in this one line. Sabshi Chodrel Ozel Dumache, Dutsi Tabu Chochi Koanye, he says, I've just found this nectar-like phenomenon, this wonderful thing. How wonderful this is. Sula den kyang dupaminu pe, meaning no matter who I teach to, they're not going to understand it. So then he says in the last line, Mima nagini suniparcha. So I'm not going to speak, I'm going to abide in the forest. So this is the first thing he said when he first became enlightened. This is too hard. I can't teach anybody. No one will understand. But as you might know, then it said that the god Brahma descended from the heavens and asked the Buddha, please, there are some people in the world who will understand. There are some beings who their ignorance is not too thick and they might understand. So please teach us. So then the Buddha proceeded to teach with a lot of different words. He taught for 45 years, teaching all kinds of different subjects, because that was what was from the world's perspective. That's how we would understand. Otherwise, how could we have understood if he just said this line, Sabji Tridrel Uzel Dumache, profound, peaceful, free of proliferation, clear light, uncompounded. So then he says, he didn't violate the teachings of the world. I mean, the Buddha didn't say that causes don't have effects, and he didn't say that that we have night and day, and we have seasons, and we have actions that we do that have particular effects. He just taught exactly how we perceive things in accordance with that. Yet in reality, he never taught. Meaning from his perspective, there's nobody teaching anything. There's nothing being taught. It's all just appearances to our minds based on our concepts. But not comprehending Tathagata's speech, some toward this stainless discourse feel afraid. So some people, they don't understand what he means when he says emptiness. And so they feel afraid of it. They think that he's just saying nothing exists, or that the person is going to be annihilated, whatever reason they might be afraid. From this arises this result. We don't negate this worldly mode. Dependent things inherent lack. So how could they exist? That's true. The faithful strive at suchness, then with logic draw this inference. Teach this baseless dharma by that, abandon being and non-being peace. To know from this arises that, turns back the net of wicked views. Attachment, anger, ignorance, thrown out, unstained, nirvana is one. So again, we have, from this arises this result. We don't negate this worldly mode, meaning, yes, there is cause and effect. We're not saying that's not true. Our teaching on emptiness is not negating cause and effect. But dependent things lack inherent existence. Because they're dependent, they lack inherent existence. So how could they exist inherently? That's true. Although this last line is actually a little ambiguous, and it's commented on differently by different commentators. So it could also be saying, how could they exist? Could also be saying that how could emptiness itself be inherently existent if everything is dependent on other things? So even this emptiness itself is not inherently existent. And then that's true could also be interpreted as, you must realize that. This is the thing that must be ascertained. So then the faithful strive at ascertaining this. They strive at suchness. Then with logic, they understand this. They draw this inference. They infer that things do not have inherent existence. And then they teach this baseless dharma, the emptiness. And by that, then beings abandon adherence to existence and non-existence, the two extremes. And then they achieve the middle way, which is peace. So to know from this arises that, to know cause and effect of actions, karma, turns back the net of wicked views, of wrong views. And attachment, ignorance thrown out, unstained, nirvana is one. So through meditating on this, then we can be free of suffering. Okay. So I have a few things to say in closing. And then, as I said, this will kind of hopefully give an idea of how this can become a practice. So I want to talk about 3 different subjects. The first is merit. because as many of you might know, in Buddhism we have the two main functions of the path, or we say wings of a bird, of merit and wisdom. So if we only try to accumulate wisdom without merit, then it's very lopsided. A bird can't fly with one wing. It's Chandrakirti himself who gave this analogy. And then we have the three higher trainings, which is to understand wisdom within the context of Buddhist practice. It's not just about meditating on emptiness, but it's also has to be, have the other higher trainings of ethical discipline and concentration. And then I'll talk a little bit about Tantra, because as all of you know, in Tibetan Buddhism, Tantra is a central subject, and I imagine most of you have at least had some teaching on that. And to explain how this fits into that, that some people get a lot of misunderstandings of what Tantra is and how that relates to the rest of the path. So I'll just talk a little bit about that too. So first, in terms of merit, this is a verse from Nagarjuna's other texts by him, 60 stanzas on reasoning. Those seeking suchness, first of all, to them say everything exists. Later, when they know these things, without attachment, teach the void. Those who don't realize the void, engaging in mere scholarship, but not creating merit, these ones, the worst of beings, destroy themselves. So I want to say, I'm not, because you'll see these pictures here, and I have the worst of beings. I'm not trying to imply that these two people are the worst of beings, but I am trying to give a concrete example of the kind of thing that Nagarjuna is talking about. But before that, I'll just say what he's saying in the stanzas specifically, because this first stanza is very important. He's saying to those seeking to understand emptiness, suchness, well, first of all, tell them everything exists, meaning teach them the basic teachings and teach them about karma. Don't just immediately say that everything is empty of inherent existence. Later, when they have stable ascertainment of karma and of the Four Noble Truths and of impermanence and so forth, and they have less attachment, it's without attachment, but it really means they have less attachment than they originally had, then you can teach voidness, emptiness. But you want to be careful. If somebody, as I said on the first day, it's like handling a snake. And if somebody isn't ready, it can actually be harmful as opposed to helpful. And those who don't realize the void, they don't properly understand emptiness, but they engage in mere scholarship, meaning that they think a lot about it, but they don't know how to practice it. And not creating merit. This is why I say merit is very important. These ones, the worst of beings, destroy themselves. So I'll talk about what merit is. We have this word sunam in Tibetan, I think punya in Sanskrit. The idea here is that sunam, or merit, essentially it means good karma, a store of good karma. That when we have collected this, it will make things go well in our lives. It has all kinds of different effects. Merit can also be harmful if we have. It's not in and of itself harmful, but if somebody has a lot of merit, they can also do a lot of harm, because things they do will be successful. That will be reflected, and other people will be attracted to them. We see sometimes, world leaders who are very powerful, and people are almost hypnotized by listening to their speeches. This is a sign that this person who's giving this speech has a lot of merit. It's like a magnetic force. His Holiness the Dalai Lama even said this, that he said, when I met Mao Zedong, it was like walking into the presence of a powerful magnetic field. There's a person who was worshipped by an entire nation of people. They treated him like a god king. And as a result, he was able to create a lot of destruction. He did do some good things also in China, but he had a lot of power to also harm a lot of people. So that's the result of merit. This person had a lot of merit. But on the in a positive sense, when people have merit, then when they're trying to follow a spiritual path, things will go well for them. We see some people that try to follow a spiritual path and something really bad happens. They try to meditate and they go crazy, or they get led by a false teacher who takes advantage of them. So this has to do with the person's merit. Even that they try to do something positive, it's unsuccessful. And specifically, when they try to understand something like emptiness, it's very hard to understand. And they might even get wrong views about it. This has to do with merit. If somebody has a lot of merit, then when they hear about emptiness, as we talked about yesterday morning, they might have an emotional reaction, as though this is so wonderful. They understand it intuitively. And when they think about the topics, it just makes intuitive sense. We sometimes just think that we're in control of our minds, but oftentimes we have thoughts come into our mind. We don't really consider where it came from. So you're thinking about something, and all of a sudden you have this insight or this creative idea of what this means. If we have a lot of merit, that will happen more frequently. Things will just click, and we'll have some kind of insight into something. Also, there's the understanding that sometimes we can also be helped by other beings. There will be spirits or Buddhas or Bodhisattvas or whatever who will tell us the right answer, who will indicate to us whether we are aware of that or not. Sometimes it might just seem like we thought of it, but it's like somebody else putting this thought in our mind. Some people actually have very powerful visionary experiences, and they feel like somebody's instructing them. This is also a reflection of their merit. If somebody has merit, these kind of things will happen. Meaning somebody has created good karma. So that's not something random. If we want to understand emptiness, it's good to accumulate a lot of merit. You might not understand it in this life, but we can gain more merit and that will help us to understand it in the future. And even within this life, before we engage in really intensive meditation, it's very important to create a lot of merit. And there are different ways to do that. But first, let me just finish talking about what I have here. So I've given an example of two Western philosophers who I believe had some understanding of emptiness in a certain degree. It doesn't mean that they necessarily understood the Buddha's teachings, although both of these people were actually influenced by Buddhism. They did read some Buddhist teachings. But I think that they would fall into the category of what Nagarjuna was saying is a wrong understanding of emptiness, a dangerous understanding of emptiness. And we can see how this can actually be harmful. So the first of these, some of you might know, this is Schopenhauer, the German philosopher who lived in the first part of the 19th century. And he himself explicitly said he admired Buddhism. Now, I don't know how much exposure he had, because until about 1840, there was really nothing good written on Buddhism in the West. And when I say nothing good, I don't just mean nothing accurate, but I mean nothing positive. Most things written about Buddhism before that were polemics trying to discredit the Buddha and say how evil this religion is, written by Christian missionaries mainly. But around 1840, there were some actual, positive things to be said, and people started taking it as maybe this is something we should consider. So I think Schopenhauer may have been one of the first people. But as I say, I don't think he probably knew a lot about it. But in any case, his understanding, because Schopenhauer has often been called a pessimist, which I think is an apt term for him. He thought life was full of suffering, and human existence was just one pain after the other. And he identified with Buddha's teachings, that Buddha said everything is suffering, the life is full of suffering. But I think, then it can be taken to the extreme. Schopenhauer also felt that, therefore, we should just withdraw from the world. That there's nothing really we can do about it. He actually apparently said, wrote that it would be ideal if all people in the world would become celibate and stop having children. So then the human race would die out and we wouldn't suffer anymore. This is not what the Buddha was trying to say, although it could be taken that way. When we look, okay, the Buddha was celibate and he taught his monastic followers to not have children either. And he also said that everything is suffering. This is a subtle distinction. The Buddha was saying that it's possible to be free of suffering through concentration and insight. The point isn't just to kill yourself or to stop the human race. And the reason that monastics are celibate, it is partially because of the understanding that, yes, having children is not necessarily positive in that it does bring more suffering into the world. But really, that's not the main point. The main reason monastics are celibate is that they can have time and space to meditate, to focus on cultivating their minds. Furthermore, I think it would seem, I'm reading this a bit into his philosophy, but it would seem that there's kind of this attitude that, we can't really improve the world or make it much better. And that, this is Indian philosophy saying, the world is just full of suffering, so we need to get out of the world, which I don't think is really how the Buddha was intending things to be taught. This is also a point that people might want to debate about. So for one thing, Schopenhauer said we shouldn't have any kind of desire for anything. If we have desire for anything, it'll just let us down. We shouldn't have this kind of will to do things. But the Buddha was very clear. This is actually in some sense a mistranslation. People think that desire is considered bad in Buddhism because we say attachment is an affliction. But this means, attachment means desire for things that we exaggerate the qualities of them. So we expect that sense pleasures are going to bring us the sort of stable happiness. This is a negative kind of desire, but desiring to achieve liberation and enlightenment is actually very positive, and we should have a lot of ambition to do that. Likewise, the Buddha was very clear that we want to practice contentment, meaning that we shouldn't, try to constantly be getting more and more things and having a bigger house and more money. Just be happy with what we have to survive. So contentment in terms of subsistence, physical subsistence. But we shouldn't be content with the state of our minds. We shouldn't just think, oh, my mind is just a mess and I'm a crazy, unhappy person. What to do? That's just how it is. We should actually feel a lot of drive to change that, to do something about that, and feel I really ought to improve my mind, and therefore have desire to be free of samsara. And likewise, I don't think the Buddha would have been against human progress. I don't think this idea was so strong in ancient India or anywhere in the ancient world, because there wasn't such a clear progression, from generation to the next of improvements in the world. Whereas in the last 200 years or so, that's happened quite rapidly. The world has become a much safer and a much more developed place, which of course is a mixed blessing. There are drawbacks to that too, but I think overall it's very positive. We've definitely lessened, illness and violence in the world, and this is a very positive thing. And I think, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, if he's the spokesman for the Buddha in the modern world, clearly is in favor of this. He thinks we should apply reasoning to human problems and try to find, creative solutions to problems, not just in terms of meditation, but also in terms of, building schools and hospitals and making a political system that's more effective, all kinds of things. I don't think the Buddha would have been against that. I think it's a misunderstanding of the Buddha's teachings to say, he said, just forget about the world, it's all a mess. If we think that we're going to make the world so wonderful that no one's ever unhappy, this is maybe a bit too extreme. I think if we think about somebody like Karl Marx, who seemed to be a little bit too much of a utopian worldview, that if we just create this great society, then there's not going to be any fighting anymore because everyone will be happy. This is ignoring human psychology. We have to temper this, external progress, obviously, with working with our minds. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have any kind of progress or that we can't get a lot of benefit from that. And even with Marx, I mean, His Holiness has said explicitly a number of times, in some ways he thinks that Marx's philosophy is very good. It's based on a principle of compassion, that we should make the world more equitable. Different people should have equal, shouldn't be this that some people are so rich and some are so poor. Everyone should have what they need, and it shouldn't be fighting over these things. It's just a matter of understanding, this is the balance between these things. His Holiness, a couple of years ago, we had the Mind Life Conference at Sarah at our monastery, which was really wonderful. I was very impressed by this. All these Western scientists and psychologists coming to discuss with the monks about the nature of mind, nature of self. And His Holiness gave the opening talk to this conference, and he said, he was talking about the problems in the world, and that people pray to God, please God, come and fix all these problems. There's all these this environmental crisis in the world. Please God, can you please come and stop this? So His Holiness said, well, I think when you die, maybe you'll go and meet God, and you'll ask God, why did you make all these problems in the world? And then God will say to you, you created the problem. You solve it. Don't ask me. So the point is that all of these problems in the world, if we search, most of them are man-made. And therefore, by eliminating ignorance as the root cause, then we can solve the problems. And ignorance doesn't just mean conceiving things as inherently existent. It also means all the conventional kinds of ignorance that are creating environmental destruction, that are creating inequality, wars in the world. But ultimately, also, if we understand emptiness, that should support that, because at a deeper level, all of these are coming from the conception of inherent existence. And therefore, we then project qualities onto objects that aren't there. But on a conventional level, we have to focus on both. Focus on these, how we can make things better in the short term as well. So this is why, as I say, I think in terms of Schopenhauer's philosophy, it's too pessimistic. Buddhism is not meant to be pessimistic. It's just meant to be recognizing what the cause of suffering is. It's if we have this sort of overly optimistic view that we can solve all the human problems just by giving everyone more money, or by making a better political system, this is just not realistic. It's not that it's pessimistic to say it's wrong. It's just a matter of recognizing what's the cause of the problem. You're missing the point. You're sort of missing the target by trying to get rid of the cause of the problem. So secondly, we have Nietzsche, another German philosopher who was actually influenced by Schopenhauer. And I think a lot of you probably know him. So Nietzsche also was, at least, said that he was in favor of Buddhism. Again, I really don't know how much he knew about it. I think mainly he was against Christianity, and so he liked to have a counterpoint to that. But also, he was definitely somebody who didn't say things without thinking about them. So he must have had, reasons for saying these things. And Nietzsche, I think, is actually more complex. He's a very complex philosopher, and it's very hard to pin him down. And I think, he, to a certain extent, he had some recognition of what we call emptiness. And talking about the way that we create social constructs. We create a picture of who we are and what's meaningful, what has value. And then we think that that is inherently valuable. In this system in 19th century Europe, people had things that they considered important and values that they treasured. and they thought that this was all created by God. And Nietzsche was a very perceptive person. He saw through this. It seems that he was very good at recognizing when people were deceiving themselves. And it was actually very depressing for him, because almost everybody he knew seemed to be in this cloud of self-deception. They seemed to have all these, a lot of them were Christians. So especially he didn't like Christianity, and he thought that, it's interesting, he liked Christ. He thought Jesus Christ was one of the greatest people ever to have lived. But he said the one true Christian died on the cross. That after that, people have been misunderstanding what he was saying, or worshiping him as opposed to emulating him. But in any case, I think this is exactly when I talk about not creating merit. He had a lot of actually perceptive ideas, but it was driving him crazy. He was a very unhappy person, a very lonely person, and he didn't know how to bring this into practice. It was like all these thoughts just going on, and he would just write and write and write, creating this huge corpus of texts without really doing anything to make his mind any happier. And so, there's too much emphasis on thinking about things and not enough understanding of how to generate, just for one thing, day to day, to measure your behavior, and then also to do meditation and to create some kind of calmness in the mind. And also, of course, to recognize your own self-deception in the way that your own mind might be exaggerating, because he also wrote quite a lot of polemics, kind of attacking people. It may have been, again, to some extent based on correct perception, but you're exaggerating the object. And furthermore, I think he got into a lot of very dangerous ideas, that he took some of these things too far. So one of Nietzsche's central philosophies is we call perspectivism. Seeing that basically, as he saw it, when we have ethics and values, these only are relevant to a particular perspective. So we have values in our culture. It's wrong to do this and it's right to do that. And this is based on sort of values that we've inherited over generations. It's not something inherent. It's not inherently right or wrong to do certain things. And this can be very dangerous. And to give an example of how this can be dangerous, we can see some of how Nietzsche, during his lifetime, Nietzsche was basically unknown, but was actually very influential in the 20th century. I think partly because during the time he lived, people were not ready to hear what he had to say. It was still quite a conservative society, and things started changing, and people started being open to what he had said. And some of the people that were open to these included Mussolini and Hitler. Now, it's quite clear that both of these people misinterpreted his philosophy, and it's quite certain he would not have supported what they did. But at the same time, it's quite easy to see how they could read his philosophy that way. Hitler, actually, it seems that for Mussolini's birthday, Hitler sent Mussolini a copy of the collected works of Nietzsche. And also he made, frequent trips to the library, which was presided over by Nietzsche's sister, who was still alive, and met her, and she supported what he was doing, his regime. She was also quite different than her brother. She was more nationalistic. But, this idea that basically a great man can make his own laws, that he should not be attached to all of these different values of society that are holding him back from making a better world. That because all of these things are just based on particular person's perspective. It's not inherently right or wrong to do one thing or the other. So we can see that having that philosophy behind him, because Hitler obviously we say he's a very evil person. He did all these bad things, which is obvious, but he was also a very thoughtful person. He was not just somebody, like a street thug, just beating people up. He had a lot of thought processes behind what he was doing, and really had considered why this was an important thing to do, and had read a lot of different philosophy that had influenced him. And likewise, Nietzsche was very influential in other philosophical movements of the 20th century, like postmodernism, some of you might know about, which again, I think is too extreme. It's a little bit saying that everything is created by mind, all of these man-made values we have. But it gets to the point, like in some extreme points of this isn't to say that all of the postmodernist philosophers claim this, but some of them even tried to say that there's no truth in science, that all of, when we talk about different scientific findings, we can't say this one is true and this one is false, because it's all relative. But this again, Nagarjuna is very clear. Emptiness does not negate conventionally that one thing could be right and one thing could be wrong. It's not just a matter of perspective. It's not like, from my perspective, the speed of light is one thing, but from somebody else's perspective, it's different. It just depends on how you think about it. Conventionally speaking, there are particular ways that things function and particular ways they don't function. And we can examine that and understand it better. So if we get too caught up, if we get too attached to emptiness, meaning that everything is the sort of too much relativity, without any kind of stability in terms of what is right and wrong. So again, what I'm talking about here is merit. So I think my point is that in both of these cases, when people have ideas, we think that ideas are, sometimes we might think that ideas are not so important in terms of the world. That really makes effects is actions. But ideas are the foundation of human behavior and society. And the ideas people have, what ideas come into their mind, and what they consider important is very much determined by their karma. So if people create negative karma, it will create the cause in the future life to have wrong views, or to be taken in by wrong views, to hear a wrong view and think that sounds right to me. I think that person is onto something. Whereas the opposite, if somebody has merit, they will hear the right teaching and they'll think that sounds right. I want to learn more about that. And when they try to learn more about it, it will make sense to them, and they will be able to progress and they'll be able to use so many blocks in their understanding. I mentioned this before about even the possibility of having some kind of influence by other entities. This might sound very kind of, how do you say? Some people might disagree with that, might feel that that's beyond ordinary experience. But even just looking at some non-Buddhist, again, Western examples, people in the 20th century who were very influential, where this seemed to be happening. So one of these was Albert Einstein. If you read anything about his years when he was doing these thought experiments to discover incredible advances in scientific understanding, he says that it was almost as if he was just channeling something else, that he was just sitting in his room thinking, and these ideas were coming to him from some force. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's an external force. This is not always clear. It could be, in Buddhism, we'd say it could be one or the other. It could be this, that the person has such strong merit that the intuitive ideas just kind of flow into their mind naturally. But it could also be a connection with some kind of higher being that has a great understanding, that is helping them to understand. Another example is the Indian mathematician Ramanujan, some of you might know about. I think there was a movie about him just a few years ago. So as I understand, he also claims to have some connection with a Hindu god that was giving him these incredible powers of mathematical abilities. And then another example, a religious person, we have Mother Teresa. Now, some of you might know the example of, how she talks about how she started her path of going out and helping people. She was a nun in Calcutta, but before she was living on the street, she was just living in the nunnery, teaching. And then she went to do a retreat in Kalimpong in Northeast India. And while she was in the train, then she says that God gave her a vision. And she saw very clearly that she needed to go out on the streets and help people. So, whether it's God in the traditional sense, as understood by Christians, in any case, it would appear from the way she's reporting it, that she's being guided by some higher force that's giving her information that turned out to be accurate. It could also be that somebody has a vision and they go out on the street and it's a total failure and they drive themselves crazy. But in this case, it worked out very well. It was definitely the right advice because she was able to benefit a lot of people and be successful at it. And then within the Buddhist tradition, we have obviously many examples, but I'll take the example of Tsongkhapa, the founder of the Gelug school, who obviously had an extraordinary store of merit. We look at Tsongkhapa's life, and from a young age, he was constantly being guided by these different, higher beings. He had visions of the Buddha Manjushri. When he would study different Indian texts, frequently, it seems almost regularly, the author of that Indian text would then appear to him in a vision and tell him what the text means so he could interpret it correctly. And then, as he got older and was able to manipulate this more, with the help of one of his teachers, Lama Umapa, who we'd say was a medium, channeling Manjushri, then he was able to directly speak with Manjushri on a regular basis. And whenever he had questions about things, he would ask him. And we say this is why he was so able to understand the subtle meaning of these texts, which seems so esoteric. He could read them and it just made sense. So this is something that it doesn't arise causelessly. If we think, I would like to also understand these texts this well, or not just these texts, but the teachings of the Buddha this well, then, I want to also accumulate that degree of merit. Now, of course, most of this Tsongkhapa probably did in a past life, or many past lives, really. But even in the lifetime as Tsongkhapa, we see that when he was in his late 30s, he'd been studying and studying and studying. And Manjushri said to him, okay, now it's time to take a break from studying. Now you do retreat. And he went into retreat. I think he did 1.5 million prostrations, in a cave. So not with a prostration board, but on the rocks. And then spent these years meditating, accumulating more merit to be able to understand more clearly what this is talking about. So I think what I said yesterday was that the idea of these teachings in some level is to give us some taste of what this might mean. If we have to want to understand this to be able to put that level of effort into it. What use would it be? You won't want to just waste your life and go in a cave for 20 years. If you're not going to get any great benefit out of it. But if you really feel that understanding emptiness is something worthwhile, then it might be worth that degree of effort to do that. That can really motivate us then to put effort into the more foundation levels of the path. So then I'll talk a little bit about what that path consists of. We have the 3 higher trainings. So I think many of you might know, when we talk about the 4 Noble Truths, we have the 4th Noble Truth, the truth of the path. And the truth of the path essentially means the 3 higher trainings. This is the foundation of Buddhist practice. His Holiness the Dalai Lama often says in talks, we don't want to get too far away from this. We don't want to forget that this is the foundation of Buddhist practice. Sometimes people think that Buddhist practice means making prostrations or making offerings. or reciting mantras, whatever other practice we might do. And he says, well, we should understand those things as supports, something we do on the side. But we always have to understand that the main practice is the 3 higher trainings. Without these, then the other practices don't have, it's just kind of like mouthing these words, saying mantras. It's not like you just cast a spell and say, enlighten me, please. If we understand the meaning of the mantra, then it can be helpful in supporting these, not just the meaning of the mantra itself, the words, but in terms of what mantra recitation means, what it is, what we're doing, what we're trying to do. So we have these 3 higher trainings, and you see here the Dharma wheel, the symbol of the Buddha's teachings. And the 3 higher trainings are to be understood to be symbolized here. That ethics is the hub of the wheel. It's the foundation. Without ethics, everything would fall apart. So we have to start with that basis. And then we have concentration, which is the rim of the wheel. It holds the spokes in place. Without concentration, the spokes would all just bend and bend out of shape. And then we have wisdom, which is the spokes themselves. And the spokes are meant to be sharp, actually. In this picture, they're not. But the idea is that there are these sharp spokes of wisdom that can cut through ignorance. So there is the wisdom itself that cuts through ignorance, but it has to be supported by these, the ethics as the foundation, and then the concentration that holds it in place. So I'll talk about each of these individually. I'll start with ethical discipline. So we have the higher training in ethical discipline. I've given a few quotes here. Now, these aren't necessarily, the most important, the most central quotes to ethical discipline. It's just a few that I find inspiring. So I'll read them one at a time. Myself alone, my guardian. Myself as well, my enemy. What deeds I do, for good or ill, I shall alone my witness be. So here we have the Buddha saying that you have to make the effort yourself. Whether you succeed or fail, it really rests on you and your effort. We see the Buddha saying this many times in the teachings. Now, sometimes it can seem, with Tibetan Buddhism, there's this strong emphasis on guru devotion, this idea that we have to have the strong relation with the teacher, which is definitely important. But if we take that to mean that therefore we don't have to make any effort, or that especially we don't have to think about things ourselves, that we just have to believe what the guru tells us and adopt that worldview, adopt his or her understanding of things. And this is not what the Buddha was teaching, and this is not what the teaching of guru devotion is teaching either. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, actually, I saw recently, somebody asked him about the practice of guru devotion and why is it so central. And one of the things he said is that when we read the Lamrim Chenmo, the great sages in the path, we'll see that there's a large section on guru devotion at the beginning. It's one of the largest sections of the text. And he said that actually he thinks one of the reasons it's so big, this section, is because it's not something Tsongkhapa had already talked about elsewhere. So it was the first time he was really treating the subject in depth. Whereas when we have especially the 3 higher trainings and the 4 Noble Truths, which should really be the very foundation of Buddhist practice, Tsongkhapa had already just talked about these a lot in other texts. And in some parts of the Lamrim Chenmo, he specifically says, I've already talked about this elsewhere, so I'm not going to go into it in too much detail. So it's definitely not saying that the relationship with the teacher is not important, but it's also important not to think about Buddhism as worshiping the teacher. The teacher is there to help us understand the teachings. And it's very important that we have a proper relationship with the teacher, because it's very easy to fall into self-deception. We can read the teachings and not understand them properly. That happens a lot. And also the guru is a very strong, we say, an object for us to accumulate merit through relating to the teacher properly. But this practice of ethical discipline is something that we have to apply ourselves, and we have to understand it. So then we have conscientiousness, a nectar spring. Carelessness, a source of death. By conscientiousness, no death. By carelessness, you'll always die. So when we talk about the practice of ethical discipline, it's really divided into there are 3 main mental factors that guide ethical discipline. Conscientiousness, and then what we call mindfulness or can also be translated as recollection, and then introspection or awareness, those three together. So mindfulness, when I say it can be translated as recollection, what mindfulness really means is keeping the teachings in mind. So remembering the teachings at all times. We gain insight into something, but if we don't remember it, it won't be very useful. So as we're going about our daily life, we have to always remember, if we're meditating on compassion, we have to remember to practice compassion and remember the downfalls of acting out of anger. And we have to be mindful, stay mindful of that. If we're meditating on emptiness, we always have to be mindful of the insight that we've gained in the past, so we can keep thinking about that and reflecting on that, and not just have it, something that we just once a day when we read a book, it comes in our mind, but the rest of the day our mind is totally distracted with other things. And then we also have introspection, which means that we're aware of what's happening in our minds. Inside, we have to know when anger is coming into the mind, or when attachment is coming into the mind. Otherwise, we can't do anything about it. It'll control us. And then conscientiousness means externally, we have to be very careful about every action we do. So the Buddha is saying that conscientiousness is a nectar spring, meaning it's the cause. This nectar here is talking about basically having realizations. We have conscientiousness, we'll have realizations. And no death means nirvana. If we have conscientiousness, eventually we'll achieve nirvana. Whereas with carelessness is a source of death. Not meaning like you didn't pay attention, so you stubbed your toe, or you did something, you got in an accident and killed yourself, but you'll always die, meaning you'll always be reborn in samsara, where you die. So if you don't practice conscientiousness, if you just act carelessly, you'll create the causes for further samsara. And then this last verse I have, because I think it's good to recognize that when we talk about negative actions, it doesn't just mean harming others. Of course, harming others is the strongest negative action, but it also means pursuing sense desires without restraint. This is also just as much a cause of further samsara. So when we practice ethical discipline, we have to restrain from that as well. So the Buddha said, good health and also youth, impermanent. Both wealth and even life, impermanent. Beings endangered by impermanence. What room for taking joy and sense delights? So we can think about this, whenever we feel very attracted to a particular object, we think about this health that I'm experiencing now and whatever youth I'm experiencing. If I'm already getting older, I'm still, still that's impermanent. I'll be even more older in the future. And then the wealth I have, things I accumulate, and even my life itself, is going to end, of course. So this is just something, to reflect upon continuously. So generally, when we talk about ethical discipline, some of you might know the pratimoksha vows, the bodhisattva vows, and the tantric vows. This is really the practice of ethical discipline, is to understand those as best as we can and apply them day to day. So then concentration and wisdom I put in one, just because there's a verse by Tsongkhapa that very well sums up how these two function together. So mere one-point concentration isn't seen to have the force to cut samsara's root. Yet wisdom without come-biding's path checks and checks, but can't reverse the taints. Mount wisdom fathoming the way things are, on come-abiding's firm, unswerving steed. The middle way is sharp blade, logic free of extremes, destroys extreme conceptions' focal points. Correct analysis, spacious wisdom boosts, intelligence that knows the final truth. I, the yogi, practiced in this way. You liberation seekers, please train like that. So the understanding here is that we have to have both concentration and wisdom. So I talked a lot about the wisdom side in this talk and the last few talks, but concentration we also have to have. Without concentration, then we might be able to think about things. But I just talked about these philosophers who thought and thought and thought, and it just drove them crazy. We also have to be able to have some control over our mind. And this is what concentration is. It means, it's like we exercise a lot to gain mastery over the body. People who are athletes have really mastered their body and can control their body and use its capacities in a particular way. Concentration is like exercising the mind. It's training the mind to be able to use it in a very precise and focused way. And with that, then we can have wisdom. We can really generate understanding. These topics that we've talked about, we can really focus on what they mean. And also day to day, or even just when we're meditating, we can more clearly see the way that things are appearing to our mind. If we aren't actually aware of what conceptions we hold and how our mind is creating a particular conception and experience for us, then just thinking about it won't be so effective. We have to first of all identify the way that our mind is creating experiences for us, and then on that basis start to use logic to say, is that a correct interpretation of things that my mind is making? Or can I use logic to refute it? So in terms of concentration, that's another very broad subject, so I can't really get into it in depth. Jennifer mentioned at the beginning of the talk, that I'd recently translated this book by my teacher, Chöden Rinpoche, that talks a lot about concentration. So if people are interested in that, it's called Mastering Meditation. This has, most of this book is about concentration and how to concentrate the mind. So there's that, and there's also many other teachings within Buddhism. And also, of course, concentration is something that we have to learn through practice. It's good to read about it and understand it, but it's also something we have to apply. Getting greater concentration and control over the mind. And that doesn't just mean sitting and meditating. It also means especially withdrawing, or you say limiting activities that harm concentration. That's actually more important. So a lot of things in the modern world are very harmful to concentration. Watching TV, surfing the internet, all these things are very distracting. So it doesn't mean we don't do them at all, but if we really want to generate concentration, we have to be aware of the way that these things are definitely obstacles. In the same way, if we wanted to be a professional athlete, we would limit certain behaviors that are going to prevent us from developing our body in a certain way. And likewise with the mind, we have to be aware of what behaviors we're engaging in that are very distracting. And as those behaviors are diminished, it will be a lot easier to gain concentration. We can't just distract ourselves all day and then get concentration in the evening when we sit down and meditate. So next, I mentioned just briefly about Tantra. I wanted to say something about it. So I think this verse by Tsongkhapa in this poem, Destiny Fulfilled, which is an autobiographical poem, I think it really gives a nice picture of how we can approach with teachings on Tantra, which can seem very esoteric, often almost seems strange to us. So how, what do we do when we hear about this? So he talks about how he reacted when he first learned about Tantra. He says, to navigate the course to Buddhahood, two vehicles, perfection and profound, Vajra. It's said that when compared, the secret mantra is specially supreme, totally renowned, like sun against the moon. If though I did accept these words as true, yet didn't check what kind of thing is this profoundest vehicle, to still regard myself to bear the scholar's load, if that's too wisdom, well, what other more imprudent thought than that? Unrivaled path, extremely hard to meet, to cast this one aside, alas, bizarre. And so the victor's vehicle supreme, the Vajra path, then Buddha's rarer still, profound, the two attainments treasure trove. I entered, trained with diligence for long, reflecting thus my destiny fulfilled, immensely kind, great noble wisdom trove. So at the end, he's thanking Manjushri actually for guiding him. So I think what's especially useful here is he says that when he heard about Tantra and people saying how profound this path is, his reaction was, well, if I didn't take the time to investigate this properly, that would be very foolish. He doesn't say, if I didn't practice this, I'd be very foolish. he says he needed to investigate it and check it for himself. People are saying that this is a very profound way to practice, and therefore I ought to check into this and see if it actually makes sense and see if they're right. This is how he approached a lot of things. So likewise, we have teachers within Tibetan Buddhism. Just about any teacher we'll talk about Tantra, and this is a practice we can do. So just to say, I'm not interested in that. That's not useful. It's not that we just take it on faith, but it's worthwhile to check what they're talking about and to understand. Because when we talk about Tantra, essentially what's being emphasized here is these are ways of enhancing concentration. This is probably the most important aspect of it. We talked about concentration being the support for wisdom. The stronger the concentration, then the more precise the wisdom will be. And in Tantra, the emphasis is on really utilizing the natural energies of the body and mind to gain much greater concentration. Now it's, again, just like with emptiness, we say handling poisonous snakes, and we have to approach it in the right way. It's also very dangerous to approach Tantra with a wrong understanding or to try to practice these things without proper guidance. But within Tibetan Buddhism, if anybody, if you're within FPMT or any other major organization, there's going to be tantric practice involved. And so, it's good to really, consider what it means. We might go to a center and they tell us to recite this such mantra and be part of these chants, but it doesn't have to be just something that's esoteric and based on faith. It's Tsongkhapa's approach that's really nice, is that every part of the teachings is something we can question and examine. It's not just something that that we have to feel that we do it and we don't understand what we're doing, and we just think, okay, because somebody said so, therefore it must be powerful. That's definitely not the message of Tsongkhapa. It's not the message of the Buddha, and it's not the message of the Nalanda tradition, which involves critical analysis from each person. So, dedication. I wanted to just do some dedication verses by Nagarjuna himself. So I mentioned in Precious Garland as the only of these 6 texts that is not only about emptiness. It has a lot of things on the method side of the path as well. And in the last chapter, Nagarjuna has 20 verses of dedication, which are very nice. So it would be good to have that as a dedication to Nagarjuna's teachings. So we can read through those together, and then we hopefully have some time at least for question and answer after that. So we can just read these. And as I'll mention, up until now, every verse you've seen, I translated myself, because I mentioned I like to translate things into meter in English. I think it's useful to try to mimic the style in the Tibetan. But this last part, I guess I got a little lazy. So rather than translating these 20 verses myself, I just borrowed from Jeffrey Hopkins, who is a superb translator. So there's definitely nothing incorrect here. It's all very correct, but the only difference is it won't be in meter like all the other verses have been. So we can read this together. Going for refuge with all forms of respect to the Buddha's excellent doctrine, supreme community, and bodhisattvas, I bow down to all that are worthy of honor. I will turn away from all ill deeds and thoroughly take up all meritorious actions. I will admire all the merits of all embodied beings. With bowed head and joined palms, I petition the perfect Buddhas to turn the wheel of doctrine and remain as long as transmigrating beings remain. Through the merit of having done thus, and through the merit that I did earlier and will do, may all sentient beings aspire to the highest enlightenment. May all sentient beings have all the stainless faculties, release from all conditions of non-leisure, freedom of action, and endowment with a good livelihood. May all embodied beings have jewels in their hands, and may all limitless necessities of life remain unconsumed as long as there is cyclic existence. May all women at all times become supreme persons. May all embodied beings have the intelligence of wisdom and the legs of ethics. May embodied beings have a pleasant complexion, good physique, great splendor, a pleasing appearance, freedom from disease, strength, and long life. May all be skilled in the means to extinguish suffering and have great liberation from all suffering, inclination to the three jewels, and the great wealth of Buddha's doctrine. May they be adorned with love, compassion, joy, even-mindedness, devoid of the afflictive emotions, giving, ethics, patience, effort, concentration, and wisdom. Completing the two collections of merit and wisdom, may they have the brilliant marks and beautiful features even while on the path, and may they cross without interruption the inconceivable 10 grounds. May I also be adorned completely with those and all other good qualities, be freed of all defects, and have superior love for all sentient beings. May I perfect all virtue for which all sentient beings hope, and may I always relieve the sufferings of all embodied beings. May those beings in all worlds who are distressed through fear become entirely fearless even through merely hearing my name. Through seeing or thinking of me, or only hearing my name, may beings attain great joy, naturalists free from error, definiteness towards complete enlightenment, and the 5 clairvoyances all throughout their continuum of lives. May I always, in all ways, bring help and happiness to all sentient beings. May I always, without harm, simultaneously stop all beings in all worlds who wish to commit ill deeds. May I always be an object of enjoyment for all sentient beings according to their wish, and without interference, as are the earth, water, fire, wind, herbs, and wild forests. May I be as dear to sentient beings as their own life, and may they be even more dear to me. May their ill deeds fructify for me, and all my virtues fructify for them. As long as any sentient being anywhere has not been liberated, may I remain in the world for the sake of that being, though I have attained highest enlightenment. Okay, so thank you all. We have about 20 minutes left in this session, so if people like, we have plenty of time for question and answer.
Hi, Venerable, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. My question is, there are 2 types, 2 levels of bodhicitta,
Yes.
which is the absolute bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta.
Okay.
Absolute bodhicitta is basically the realization that all the nature of all phenomena is emptiness.
Yes.
And the relative bodhicitta is basically aspiration bodhicitta and also application bodhicitta, which are rooted in compassion.
Yes.
And it works on the relative level.
Yes.
And my question is, an arahat who is said to have achieved realizations and emptiness, and also have some renunciation, but because of lack of bodhicitta, will not be able to achieve Buddhahood.
Yes.
So then the problem is then we were saying that to have ultimate bodhicitta, which is basically realizing emptiness, you need to cultivate relative bodhicitta first, which is basically compassion.
Yes.
And it's also, as you said, it's also one of the methods that we generate merit in order to achieve realization on emptiness. So
Yes.
I'm just wondering, in this case for Arahat, who have achieved realization of emptiness, but without bodhicitta. So how does that work?
So yes, it's possible to realize emptiness without bodhicitta. The arhat still has a lot of merit, but not as much merit as the bodhisattva. Now, the arhat's realization of emptiness does not constitute ultimate bodhicitta. Ultimate bodhicitta is a direct perception of emptiness when it's supported by the relative bodhicitta. Otherwise, if it's without that, it's not called ultimate bodhicitta because it's not going to become the cause of Buddhahood. As I said, having merit is very important to realizing emptiness. But merit can cause a lot of different things. Some people might have a lot of merit and thereby do a lot of negative actions. So likewise, being an arhat is by no means a negative action, it's a very positive thing. But if somebody dedicates their merit towards achieving self-liberation, that's the result that they can achieve. Whereas if they dedicate their merit towards full enlightenment, they'll need more merit than they would need to become an arhat, but that's what the merit will go towards. It depends on really their aspiration of their mind, how the merit ripens.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, okay.
Hello, hi, Venerable.
Yes, hello.
Hi. You mentioned that you tried to memorize the verses
Yes.
in the first session. Can you
Yeah.
share and demonstrate how you memorize this? By chanting or
Yeah.
just
Okay.
repeated
Yeah.
reading? Thank you.
So, okay, yeah. So memorization is something that we do in the monastery. It's part of our lifestyle. So it's something I've been practicing for many years. Since I've been in the monastery, which is almost 15 years now, I've been memorizing on a regular basis, often for several hours a day. So I started when I first came to the monastery, and what we usually do is reciting out loud. So when I first started, I did what everyone else did, and I recited out loud, which means that you take a verse. So when I started, it was just one verse a day, usually, or even half a verse a day, and you just read it out loud. I mean, you don't just read it again and again. You break it into pieces. So I would recite half of the verse, and then try to say it, say 5 times without looking at the book again, and then look at it again, and then recite the second half of the verse, and then gradually increase that. But then you have to be very careful so you can get to the point, I can say this verse again, but then you go to the next verse and you forget the first verse. So you have to be very careful to continue. If you set a daily schedule for yourself, that's the most important thing. If you just do it once in a while, then you're just going to keep forgetting it. But if you make a daily schedule, okay, I'll do this amount of time in the morning, this amount of time in the evening, then gradually you can add to it. And you also learn for yourself, how frequently you have to recite something in order to keep it in memory. So usually if you first memorize something, you have to recite it every day, or ideally 2 or 3 times a day. And then gradually you can decrease that and have it be less and less. And as you get better at it, like any skill, the more you cultivate it, the easier it becomes. And that definitely for me, I found over the years, it just became natural. When I read these verses, it just became natural to keep them in mind because I've been practicing it that way for a long time. And as I said, for many years I was reciting it out loud, but after some years, then I really damaged my vocal cords, so I had to stop that. But nowadays, and I see that a lot of monks, because unfortunately this is a major problem in the monastery, we yell a lot. You wouldn't think of that in a monastery, but we debate a lot, and debate means yelling. And we recite a lot, and we go to pujas and recite prayers a lot. So a lot of monks actually have really damaged their vocal cords. It's a common problem. So you'll usually see that older monks, they don't recite out loud. They're almost like they're whispering. I think it actually is useful to recite out loud. I wouldn't suggest yelling, but if you can at least say the words out loud, it does seem to have an effect because you hear yourself saying it, and that makes it kind of a stronger imprint in the mind. It seems maybe as you get older and better at it, I mean, not necessarily just older, but as you have more experience, then you can do this without having to say the words out loud. And you don't necessarily have to do that anyway. I mean, if you're in an environment where people are going to get offended, don't need to say it out loud. But you just have to find for yourself, although I don't say it out loud, I still do mouth the words. I sort of whisper them. That does definitely help. I don't just look at the book. So I wrote an article about this a few years ago. So if you want kind of more detail, if you go to the Mandala magazine website and then just search Tenzin Gache memorization, you should get the article, which gives a clearer picture of sort of my thoughts on it and some instructions on how to do it. But it's a really good practice. This is something that's not just unique. Some people think, oh, this is what Tibetan monks do, but this is what all Buddhist monks and nuns have done. I mean, not every single person, but in terms of, if you look back in the history of Buddhism, when the Buddha was alive, nobody wrote anything down. Every teaching he gave was memorized. And for hundreds of years, these were kept as oral teachings that were passed down. It was only later that they were written down. and they were obviously kept very precisely. We know that not just because their teachings are precise, but because different editions of the teachings that spread different places are often very much the same. There's not discrepancies, which means that if one person forgot it and changed the words, it would be different in different places. But in different places, they all seem to be fairly pretty much the same wording. And then wherever Buddhism spread, so Southeast Asia, in Theravadan countries, this is actually considered a very important skill. The monks memorize the sutras. There are a few monks that get a special kind of recognition because they've memorized the entire Pali Canon, all of the three Pitakas, the Vinaya and the Sutras and the Abhidharma. And in Tibet, nobody memorizes the entire canon because it's too big. We have more books, but people do memorize a lot of other texts. And then in China and Japan also, it's just a natural thing that monks and nuns do this because, as I said on the first day, first we memorize it, then we think about it. That might sound a little silly, but the point is that, if we don't have these things repetitively going in our mind, then just thinking about it one time isn't going to have a lot of force. It's when you memorize something, then it's like it can start to become habitual in your mind. Again, I talked about this quite a bit in that article I wrote. I think that in our society, we don't realize this, but so much of what's in our minds comes from media. And this affects how we conceive of the world. We think about what based on what we saw on TV, we gain a certain perception of the world. It's not just about having philosophy and proving things. It's just about habituating with certain ways of seeing things. And if we are constantly habituating with the Buddha's teachings, then that will affect how things appear to us and how we conceive of situations in our life. And especially with emptiness, it's, as I said, it's very hard. We say trakpo in Tibetan. It's like you can't penetrate it, but it's not like you just keep forcing it and trying to force yourself to think. If you just recite these things regularly, then it just naturally, you don't have to put so much effort into it. It just kind of naturally comes that way. So, if you can try doing this, it's a very helpful practice.
Okay, bravo.
Okay.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
I have one question.
Yes.
So we can say that those teaching about emptiness are from the second turning of the wheel, no?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I heard recently a Western teacher speak about the third turning of the wheel being about luminosity.
Yes.
I don't know if he was right or not. I don't remember when I heard about the third turning of the wheel. But can you speak a little bit about that?
Okay. Yeah. So basically, there's an idea that the Buddha had three turnings of the wheel. This is interpreted differently by different teachers in Tibet. So first of all, we have the first turning of the wheel, which we generally identify with the Dharma turning sutra, the wheel turning sutra, the first sutra that the Buddha taught, which was on the Four Noble Truths. And it's not just that sutra, but that's the main one. So the main subject matter of the first turning of the wheel is the Four Noble Truths. Mm-hmm. Now, you said that when you had to identify emptiness with the second wheel, actually, according to the Chandrakirti, and it seems also according to Nagarjuna, the Buddha did teach emptiness in the first turning of the wheel also, because if he hadn't taught emptiness, nobody would have been liberated from samsara. We can't be liberated from samsara without realizing emptiness. But he didn't teach it very extensively, because in order to achieve personal liberation, we don't need to understand emptiness in an extensive way. We can just understand it in a fairly narrow way. But to follow the Mahayana path, we have to think about it in a much broader way. So in the second turning of the wheel, the Buddha taught emptiness much more explicitly and broadly, in many different ways of lines of reasoning, ways of thinking about it. And these are said to be summed up in Nagarjuna's text. Especially root wisdom is said to be, sort of a summary of all the teachings on emptiness from the second turning of the wheel. So then we have the third turning of the wheel, and this is where it gets a lot more controversial. We have Tsongkhapa's interpretation of that, and we have also, especially Jonang. You might know the scholar shortly before Tsongkhapa named, actually name was Dolpopa Sherab Gyaltsen, but he's often known as Jorangpa. You know, he founded a school named Jorangpa, Jorang School, which is very small now in Tibet. There are still a few adherents to it, but it is not very large. But it was very influential also for especially Nyingma, Kagyu, Sakya to some extent. And so their interpretation of even what they say is the third wheel is different. What sutras they talk about as being the third wheel. But when you said about luminosity, yes. I mean, I mentioned just about a half an hour ago or so at the end, I was talking about the Buddha when he first became enlightened. He said, Zabji Chodrel Uzel Dumache. He said, the profound, peaceful, free of proliferation, clear light, the uncompounded. This is what I've realized. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that this one line summarizes the three wheels. This first Zabji, meaning profound, peaceful, is talking about the Four Noble Truths. And then free of proliferation is talking about emptiness. And Uzel, clear light, is talking about the third turning of the wheel, which is the mind realizing emptiness. So at least in Jonang philosophy, the understanding is that the third wheel is really the most definitive of the Buddha's teachings in terms of, this is talking about this luminosity of the mind. So in Gelug, we don't understand it in quite the same way. But generally speaking, this is related to Tantra. That when we talk about in Tantra, the object we're realizing, emptiness, is no different from in Sutra. It's the same object, but the mind realizing the object is much subtler. We manifest a clear light mind in order to meditate on emptiness. So this is we say the object professor, or the mind clear light, whereas the emptiness is the object clear light, objective clear light. So I don't want to make it too confusing, but in the third turning of the wheel also, we have the talk of Buddha nature. It said that in the second turning of the wheel, if we just talk about emptiness, then some people might get discouraged. They might think, everything is empty. It just seems kind of meaningless. So to encourage people, the Buddha then taught about Buddha nature, saying that we have this natural potential to become Buddhas, which at least in the Jonangpa school, again, this is identified very much with the clear light nature of the mind. So I'm not sure this teacher that you're talking about, whether he was a Nyingma scholar or a Nyingma teacher, because that would make sense to talk about luminosity in the third turning of the wheel.
I think it was a Kagyu.
Kagyu also.
Yeah.
I mean, they're both, as I said, they're very different than Jonangpa, but they're influenced by him. They have a similar interpretation of the three wheels.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Could you tell us more example of uncompounded phenomena?
Okay.
We said only the empty space and nirvana.
Yes. Okay. So uncompounded phenomena means something that doesn't arise in dependence on causes and conditions. So the Buddha generally said, everything comes from causes, but that means everything means compounded things. So compounded things means the mind and physical things and the mind, basically. Those are the two main things. And then they'd be called non-associated compositional factors, but this is just talking about, kind of abstract things like time that rely on mind and body. Time is only existent in relation to mind and body that are passing through time. So these are compounded phenomena. Anything else is an uncompounded phenomenon, and these are permanent things, but that doesn't mean it's non-existent. So one of these is uncompounded space. It's just the lack of obstruction or obstructive contact. So it's mainly, most things that are permanent are what we call negative phenomena. It's a negation of something. So for example, in this room where I'm sitting right now, there is no cat in the room, right? So that lack of cat in the room, it exists, it's true. It's not like a non-existent thing, but it's not a functioning thing. It's not like something that has cause and effect. It's just a mere absence of something. So likewise, a space in this context, it doesn't mean like outer space. It just means lack of physical obstruction. So a lack of something being there, as opposed to affirming something else being there. Other things, yeah, you said nirvana or cessation is simply the cessation or the lack of affliction in the mind. So this is considered uncompounded. It's just a negation of something. And emptiness being the negation of inherent existence it exists, because it's a correct negation, but it's not something that we can see or hear or even experience in a mental sense, in an ordinary way that we directly perceive it. Now, I mentioned the first day about this disintegratedness, because this is the big thing in Tsongkhapa's philosophy, that all the other schools of Buddhism say that the disintegratedness of something is a permanent thing. It's a mere negation. It's Tsongkhapa's unique thing. That's what I was trying to emphasize, that this is a functioning thing. So I say there's a lack of cat in the room. There's no cat in the room. This is a permanent thing. It's a mere negation. However, to say that the cat died is not a mere negation, because the cat dying has effects. The cat dying, caused me to be sad, or the cat dying, caused there to be a stench in the room, or whatever other thing there might be. So that I don't want to make it too complicated for you, but I wanted to say that because this was something I talked about a lot in the talk, and it might be something that is confusing to people. But generally speaking, as per your question about what are non-compounded things, it's mainly negations of things, the opposite of something else. There are some other things like conceptual, so like numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are permanent in the sense that you can have like one cup or one plate. These are functioning things, but then simply the abstract concept of one. The idea is that when we perceive things, this is important, they don't appear to us through a direct perception as either one or many. That's merely a conceptual overlay. They simply appear as they are. We then break them conceptually into parts. So the conceptual thing of this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, that's something that's uncompounded, because uncompounded things can only appear to our thought consciousness, our perceptions. They don't appear, our conceptions about things. They don't appear to our sense consciousness. What appears to our sense consciousness is physical things, functioning things.
Thank you. And the last thing you said, uncompounded is permanent. So is everything permanent as well, uncompounded? It's like
Yeah. So uncompounded phenomenon is synonymous with a permanent phenomenon.
Is always okay. Synonymous. Okay. I have another question in relation to memorizing, because you said it's practice, but I was wondering, what is the function really? What is the meaning of memorizing? Now that we have books and we can always come back.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Some people might think that, we have the books. At the time of the Buddha, they didn't have the books. They had to memorize it. But I think, as I mentioned, just having the book doesn't necessarily help you if it doesn't stay in your mind. Even if you read it every day, it's not staying in your mind in as strong of a way as it is if you're memorizing it. I find, especially like if we're in a puja, do prayers at the monastery, if I don't know the prayer and I'm just reading a book, I kind of just gloss through it. Whereas if I know the prayer by heart, we'd say this, it's nice we say it by heart in English, then when I recite it, I'm thinking about the meaning. It's like I know what I'm saying, because in some sense, I know what's coming next. I can think about it all as a cohesive whole. I don't have to think about each word and newly process it. I know how it all fits together. And I can focus, and I can kind of be in my own space and not have to be focused out externally on the book. Also, we meditate, we don't say, why do we meditate? And we meditate because we're trying to transform our minds. So if memorization is also a kind of meditation, meditation doesn't just have to be having no thoughts occurring in the mind. Going through a series of reasoning or a prayer in your mind is a form of meditation. So when you memorize something, that even the act of memorizing it is a kind of meditation. But then also thinking about it after you've memorized it and having it in your mind. I find when I walk around the monastery, I have prayers or texts that I've memorized kind of in my mind that are kind of going on in my mind, like I'd have a song in my head. So then it's just kind of, if you think that this is something important that you want to, use to transform your mind, you want to have a very intimate relationship with it, where it's constantly in your mind. And also, you can have a book, it's true, but if you want to think about, somebody said this, and how does it relate to what somebody else said and somebody else said? You can't, it's not just about matter of constantly flipping the pages, you have to know what's on all these different pages to know which page to turn to. You have to be very familiar with all of these different concepts to be able to put them together. It's like that in any discipline. In any discipline, people have to memorize a lot of things. A doctor has to basically know the diagnostic manual by heart. A doctor, he or she can't just, every time a patient comes in, look in the manual and say, okay, he must have this disease. You have to know what all these things are, even if you don't necessarily remember every word. But remembering every word is very helpful, because even if eventually you forget the words, it makes a much stronger imprint about remembering what all the different meanings are, if at some point you had the words in your mind. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
There's a question in the chat from Venerable Kumpan.
Okay, yes.
She asked, to create merit, I sometimes hear one's motivation has to be conjoined with bodhicitta.
Yes. Okay.
Is that true?
Yeah, is that true?
Because
well,
I would never create any bit of merit.
Well, certainly that's not the case. I mean, as I just said, the arhats have a lot of merit, have to have a lot of merit to gain arhatship. So it's certainly not the case that you have to have bodhicitta to create merit. Ordinary people create merit. I mean, I even said a lot of evil people create merit, because in order to be so powerful, they have to have created merit. Bodhicitta creates a lot of merit in and of itself. And if you have bodhicitta, every action you do will have a lot of merit. But that doesn't mean that without bodhicitta, you don't create any merit. So there's a lot of ways, to create merit. And also, as we say, it has to do with the object. This is why Lama Zopa Rinpoche often emphasizes, for ordinary people, it's very helpful to be around holy objects, because even if your mind isn't very strong, the power of the object will increase, the merit of what you're doing. But even without that, simply, sometimes we forget, we think that, doing merit, we have to do these great, enormous things. But if somebody criticizes you and you don't get angry, you create a lot of merit by practicing patience. We have the 6 perfections, and they're said to be progressively stronger merit. So practicing patience is number 3. It's higher than generosity. So not getting angry when somebody criticizes you is more merit than giving a lot of money to charity or something like that. I mean, it's not like it's not always the case. It really can depend on the situation. But generally speaking, it's saying that simply practicing patience is a very meritorious activity.
So it's just a matter of definition? Because I've heard that merit was very clearly defined by the conjunction with bodhicitta. Otherwise, one wouldn't call it merit. I would just call it, I don't know, virtuous action.
I'm not sure where you've read that. I mean, I think
Lama Lundrup, Ken Rinpoche, since you're at Kopan, Ken Rinpoche in a Kopan course many years ago mentioned during a question and answer and was quite specific about the conjunction with bodhicitta. which made everybody a little bit depressed.
I think what he might have been talking about is the merit accumulation, which is different than merit. So we have the two accumulations, the accumulation of wisdom and the accumulation of merit, right? To become a Buddha. So we say you have to accumulate merit for 3 countless aeons.
Sure.
And that means 3 countless aeons from when you first generate bodhicitta to when you become Buddha. So all that time you're accumulating the merit accumulation.
Sure.
Right? So that merit accumulation becomes the cause of Buddhahood. So that's different than just talking about merit in a general sense, which is basically synonymous with virtuous karma. But also that actually became a debate for us. I'd have to debate with Lama Lundrup, but I think at Tsongkhapa he's very clear that the merit accumulation is not only created by well, actually I wouldn't say Tsongkhapa. Tsongkhapa makes a statement that can be interpreted either way about whether Shervakas, hearers and solitary realizers, have the merit accumulation. And then Jetsun Chökyi Gyaltsen, who's the author of the Sarajay textbooks, he says very clearly, yes, the arhats, the Hinayana practitioners also have the accumulation of merit, but it's a secondary or kind of it's not the superior accumulation of merit, but it is an accumulation of merit. Whereas the Gomang author, Jamyang Shepa, he says that it's not, they don't have accumulation of merit. So it's just a matter, in that sense, it's really a matter of definition. But the main point is that, when we accumulate merit, however we define it, it's very clear, we talk about Chandrakirti talking about how merit can be destroyed by anger. This is the difference between the merit accumulation and the wisdom accumulation. The wisdom accumulation is considered very stable. The more we understand emptiness, we won't lose that understanding. But our merit accumulation can go up and down. We can accumulate a lot of merit and then destroy it by getting angry. Or also there's other ways to destroy merit, such as having wrong views, abandoning the Dharma, which would mean you hear the Dharma teaching and you just reject it and think this is useless, something like that. Let's see. Yeah, also committing a defeat, a monk or a nun committing a defeat is said to be a way of destroying merit. There's a few others, but anyway, the point is that, so the merit accumulation, we have to be very careful with it. It's kind of fragile. So we dedicate it to enlightenment in order for it to, last to enlightenment. But even then, it's actually said it can still be destroyed. So which is why, especially, why Chandrakirti emphasizes again and again, be careful about anger, because anger is very destructive. Even if someone is a bodhisattva with a lot of merit, if they get angry, they can really damage their merit. They won't damage their wisdom, which means that eventually, they're not going to fall back on the path, but they're also going to make it much harder to move forward because their merit has been damaged. So we have to, every time we have merit, we have to really think about how I want to dedicate this. This doesn't just mean saying the words, I dedicate to enlightenment. I mean, that's part of it, but the main thing is what we really want in our heart. Somebody who really wants to harm people, if they have a lot of merit, they'll be reborn as a powerful person who can harm people. Whereas if somebody really wants to benefit people and they have a lot of merit, they'll be reborn in that way. But even just not just benefiting in a temporal way, if we think, I want my merit to ripen as enlightenment, I really want to be reborn in a place where I can keep practicing this path, that will create the causes for that merit to ripen in that way.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question, but I think we're over time. No, we are over time, I think. I'm not sure. Jennifer? Yeah,
well, we'll also, I was going to say, I'm happy to keep answering questions for now. It's perfectly fine, but also we're going to have an online forum. So if people have more questions, they're welcome to submit those. But if, as long as it's okay with Jennifer, and you can tell me if it's not, but I'm happy to stay here for a little while longer if people still have questions.
I just posted one question, Venerable. Since you're on the topic of merit, could you please throw some light on the difference between accumulation of merit and grasping at merit?
Okay. I'm not really sure I can say what you mean, but
I think we read in one passage in Vajrakata Sutra that a bodhisattva shouldn't look at grasping of merit, but accumulation of merit. So I was just trying to understand if it can be.
Yeah. So that in the Dhammapada Sutra, the Bhattacharya Sutra, specifically, the Buddha is talking about grasping in the sense of considering merit to be inherently existent. This is exactly what he means by grasping. The Bhattacharya Sutra is very clear. That's the main focus of the sutra, is that no matter how much you practice the path, if we have the conception that I'm an inherently existent person, practicing an inherently existent path, accumulating inherently existent merit to achieve inherently existent Buddhahood, that will actually become an obstacle. So it's not that there is no merit in that. And for most of us, it's very hard to be free of that. But it's important to recognize that the more we can be free of that, grasping at it as existing in a fixed inherent way, and not just totally a realization of emptiness, but also just, as I talked about on the first day, getting out of our fixed concepts of things, that we might have this idea, we might hear about Buddha's teachings and kind of disbelieve it all and take it and think that we understand everything right away and just adopt a new worldview. And thereby we block ourselves from our understanding developing in a deeper way. So then we kind of become dogmatic about the teachings that we have and about what a bodhisattva what it means to be a bodhisattva and what it means to achieve enlightenment. This can actually become an obstacle. So in addition to always trying to create positive actions, we also have to develop our understanding and not consider that we necessarily, the way we understand things now, is exactly the way they really are.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so maybe there's no more questions, it seems like right now, which is, as I said, if people continue to have any more questions in the coming days or weeks, we can have an online forum. I'm happy to continue responding as best as I can. Thank you all for coming. This has been very nice. First experience teaching on Zoom, getting used to seeing all these people on the screen. So I think, I'd be happy to teach again Food Institute, but I can't commit to anything right now because I don't know where I'm going to be. Right now I'm stuck in Nepal, waiting to get back to India, and I don't know in a month where I'm going to be. So I'm not sure of my schedule. But once that becomes clearer, hopefully we can consider, as I mentioned, there were these 6 texts of Nagarjuna, and so it would be very nice to teach on some of the others. I think maybe especially I just did the 670 stanzas of emptiness. I think the 6 stanzas on reasoning would be a good counterpoint to that, which actually is a lot more comprehensible, to be honest. It's easier to understand what he's saying, and it's more focused on meditation, the mind meditating on emptiness than emptiness itself. So it might be easier for people. I'd also considered, because we're studying, we'll see. I don't know what we're studying right now because I don't know what's going to happen in the monastery, but our next subject we're supposed to be studying is the 2nd chapter of Dharmakirti's text, the Pramana Varika, the applying logic to understanding the Buddha's teachings. And in the 2nd chapter, specifically from Dharmakirti, he really talks about how we can use logical systems to establish the Buddha as a valid teacher, to establish the Buddha's teachings. And so one of the first topics in the 2nd chapter is Dharmakirti trying to use reasoning to negate a creator God, which I think is a very relevant topic even today. And so if it happens that we end up studying this in the next month, which might be happening, I would find it quite interesting to maybe do something about that. and talk about what reasonings he uses, and especially apply it to a lot of the modern arguments that are being put forth, because this is still an ongoing argument among religious and scientific people. So let's see. As I say, I really don't know where I'm going to be or what's going to be happening. So hopefully that will be sort of clarified sometime in the near future. Also, Venerable Namdrung, you might know, is here with me. We're both from Sarah, and we'll both probably either stay here together or go back together, and he might also be able to offer some teachings. So yeah, thank you again very much. Thank everyone for coming. Thank you, Jennifer and Ray, for the technical help and for organizing everything. This really worked out very well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Venerable, for these wonderful teachings. I think I got a lot of feedback that these are really practical and engaging and really brought the teachings to life. So thank you so much. And please do teach again many times, I hope, for Root, and hopefully in person next year as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.